Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Beer Blather 192. We're going to get into the title and all that just in a second, but of course, I have to give you the first 3 minutes of bullshit. One, we're coming in on our channel in Odyssey and YouTube for a while, and Twitter for as long as they don't kick us out of there again. By the way, I have good news regarding that. Just remember, we're going to leave YouTube. We're not going to pay any attention to chats in YouTube or in Twitter. The only chat we pay any attention to is the one in Odyssey. So make sure you come to Odyssey, subscribe to our channel, click on notifications, and God forbid, maybe even drop a coin or two. You can do that by clicking on the super chat. It's a $sign on the chat, on support, which goes directly to the channel without showing on the chat, or going to quadverum.com/support us, altogether as it sounds. And having done that, Beer Blather 192, Confronting Reality. This is Saul Montes Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information, right here with my good friend, Thomas Victor from Nazifornia. The poor guy is suffering more than a Jew in a concentration camp, which is more or less what California is turning into. Oh, God. Did I say that? Okay, listen, I'm immune. I can make Jewish jokes. That's it.
You said it, not me.
Yes, exactly. I can say it, you can't, because if you say it, we're going to jump on you. All of these anti-Semites who are essentially clamoring for the demise of Jews everywhere and the annihilation of every Jew in the Middle East will suddenly take offense because I made a Jewish joke. Oh my God. Because they not only want to kill Jews, they want to kill your freedom of speech too. How are you doing in California?
Oh, I'm okay. We're getting new neighbors. It looks like my hope that the Chinese would take over the street is not coming to fruition. So people like the ones next door are metastasizing, and they've all discovered cars and little Oompa Loompa motorbikes that have wheels like this big around with no mufflers. And you know, it's one of these things. I noticed years ago. Okay, I've lived in multiple countries, and in every country I've ever lived in, regardless of the language spoken, I've witnessed this particular scene. Someone's in a car. The car has a hood up, and another person. These are always men. He's leaning over the engine and he says, okay, start it up. Person starts it up and floors it, and you start hearing this racket, and the guy yells, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. Then he looks around and he tells him to start it up again, and then the same thing happens. He's not doing anything, he's just watching, and maybe he's hoping to fix whatever's broken with his mind. But I've seen it in Japan. I saw it in the Netherlands. I saw it in the UK. I saw it in Texas. I see it in California. Only here, what people do is they have parties where they invite everybody over to experience the engine of their giant truck. And they play music really loud. They all drink beer. They all scream with laughter. And then periodically, the hood of the truck is up. It's in the driveway. Somebody gets in the truck and starts the engine up and floors it. And everybody gathers around to watch all the engine parts spin around, and the muffler's going, and the engine, is making its own cacophony. And this is going to be how life is going to be from here on out, apparently. it's I remember when I came here at the age of 5 in 1967. Oh, it was so different. And now all those people who once lived here and who've since passed away, they would be spinning like centrifuges
Oh
in
God,
graves.
I didn't get there that early. My first trip to California was in '81,
Mm-hmm.
and it was still closer to '67 than what it is today. I mean, Orange County was still farms and dairies and oranges. Ha! I wonder where they get the name from.
Mm-hmm.
And the quality of life in California was second to none in this planet.
Oh, yeah.
It was the best quality of life in the best quality of life country in the world. The everything was perfect. Everything was perfect, and there was an optimism and a can-do attitude that you couldn't find anywhere else in the planet.
Yeah.
New York was gloom and doom compared to California, which was, of course, Tinseltown for the up, let's say, the tight sphinctered New Yorkers.
Yeah, yeah. The Golden State.
The Golden State, and it was. San Francisco was the most beautiful and most livable city in the world, bar none.
Yeah. I arrived in San Francisco on the tail end of its greatness in 91, and I only lived there a couple of years. But when I went back, I left in 93, and when I went back in 2000, Willie Brown was the mayor, and it was a disaster already. I haven't been back since 2000, and my brother went there in 2016 or 17, and he stayed in a hotel that's since closed down. It was a very nice hotel, and he said you would, on that block, there were bank lobbies, and there were people going into the bank lobbies and getting into elevators and going up into their apartments. I'd never seen that before, but everybody who lived behind the hotel was wealthy. And then in the next block, it was this steaming, heaving mass of screaming, fornicating, vomiting, urinating, defecating homeless people. It was like you just wouldn't go into that. You would just stop and watch all of this
turn around. Yes.
And at night he kept hearing this noise, and he couldn't figure out what it was, and he finally realized it was the power washers. They were power washing the streets every single night to get rid of all the fecal matter and the urine and the blood. And that was
the needles.
And the needles. And that was 5-6 years ago.
Yep.
Now, I mean, and okay, have you heard of that luxury apartment that they built? They decided they were going to gentrify Market Street, so they built this giant thing, and it's starting to lean, and it's going to fall. It's going to collapse. They can't stop it. It's leaning more, by the month.
What is this? The Leaning Tower of bullshit?
Yeah, and
holy crap!
It's going to collapse, and everybody who moved in is like fighting the city to get their money back from these multi-million-dollar apartments, and the city's got no money or refusing, and the builders saying, well, I built to code, so don't look at me. So it's just a catastrophe. And in the meantime,
my building is falling down, but don't look at me.
Yeah. No, I mean, this could be like that apartment what was it, an H-shaped building or whatever that collapsed in Miami on the beach?
It was a Y-shaped building,
Y-shaped.
and it was 40 years old at least.
Right.
And apparently, the final report came out. I haven't read it yet; it's too many pages. But apparently, when they were fixing or doing work on a building next door, they literally undermined the foundations of this one, and it came down like a deck of cards, you know.
Mhm.
But it wasn't. I don't believe it was a construction defect per se, but a whole lot of bullshit going on today.
This was just your typical California corner cutting. Um, in April, every fast food restaurant in California will be forced to pay its burger flippers $20 an hour. And so McDonald's has already announced drastic price hikes. So the estimates are that a Big Mac alone is going to cost $14. So
I wouldn't pay 7 for that piece of shit. Imagine 14.
I remember, it doesn't matter because inflation, but I remember when a Big Mac was like $1.20.
Oh yeah, and the White Castles were a dime.
Yeah. No,
and I used to buy them by the dozen when I was in school.
Well, my brother, okay, the propaganda now is that, the economy's doing pretty good except for inflation. Well,
I'm doing just fine health wise if it weren't because I'm dying.
Except for the cancer. My brother went and he got a little, it's like 3 steaks or something from Smart and Final, which is, it's a step above the average supermarket, but it's still, the quality is really good and the price has been low. And as he was looking for a place in the freezer to put it, he found that he already had a pack of the exact same pack and everything, same manufacturer and everything, but it's exactly a year old in the freezer. So he took pictures and sent them to me. And a year ago, this steak was $12.99 for 3 steaks, and now it's $22.99.
Yeah.
So
it's about par for the game. And by the way, sure, you can pick a specific product. It's gonna go higher or lower than average inflation, but I don't give a shit. It's other things like, I don't know, pork loin was about $1.80. Now it's about $2.05. It's still cheap as shit. What can I tell you? But the problem is, people have been spending hundreds of dollars, hundreds, every month in extra money for gas, heating, electrical bill, as compared with 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And that is a peculiar type of inflation, which is way higher than the 3% of consumer prices and all that jazz. And something's got to give. I heard the one of the governors of the Fed in Minneapolis say that the Fed is kind of like trying to figure out why we still have an inverted yield curve. Really? I mean, what the fuck do we pay for, guys? I think I already discussed this a year ago here.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Nobody wants to buy long-term bonds. Among other things,
yeah, and nobody.
We don't know how big the explosion is going to be when the higher interest rates meet the American consumer.
Well, nobody's buying houses right now. There's an acute housing shortage because nobody's building them. My brother moved into an unincorporated part of Vegas, and when he moved there, however many years ago now, it was mostly vacant lots, and there was a building boom. And now, all those houses they built, what they used to do is they used to build like these micro subdivisions and call them, fence them in and call them rosy fields and tranquil park or whatever. And none of those places have sold. They're all standing empty, and they're still building, but they're slow building. So now they're taking 5 months to do a single house. And
people are taking money out of their retirement accounts and savings accounts to make ends meet.
Yep.
They're waiting to see if interest rates come down again, which they will eventually, but not without pain. So they're not buying houses. Few of them would qualify for a loan anyway at this state of the soiree. So the whole thing is a mess. This is Bidenomics, man.
Yeah,
Bidenomics mean you don't have any money. You have to pay twice as much what you used to. Credit is scarce and expensive. Welcome to Bidenomics. And just give thanks to the God of your choice that is not Kakalanomics.
Well, I mean, okay. I mean, I don't want to make any predictions because you can't, but it sure looks like Gavin Newsom is being groomed to replace Biden. And, Biden would have a better chance than Newsom.
Yeah.
I think what they're going to try and do is put in Newsom at the very last second so nobody knows about him. And Newsom is like God's gift to the Republicans because this guy can't survive outside of California. Californians are loyal to him for one reason only, in order to stick it to those damn conservatives. And, California under
and let's face it, because better than half of California is on some kind of government check now.
Well, also the ones who were left behind, they're these weird gelded males with their screaming harridan witch wives, and they're insisting at the top of their lungs that life here is fantastic. And it's a need, it's a pathological need to stick it to conservatives. And not even, I can't think of another state anymore other than California. Californians pride themselves on their unpleasantness and their arrogance and all of that. But Newsom can't survive outside of California. When he opens his mouth, he just spews out this bizarre bureaucratic babble that doesn't, I mean, I can't even imitate it. It's the weirdest thing where he's just prattling and all the Trump people have to do is show video of California and say, this is what Newsom wants to do to the whole country. And,
yeah, especially downtown LA.
Yeah. And San Francisco. I mean, for God's sake, these places are uninhabitable now.
Yeah.
And California is defiant about it. And Newsom will be defiant. Newsom is not used to being challenged. And Newsom gets very upset when he's challenged. He's not calm. He's not
Right, because we're all idiots who don't really understand
Yeah,
these
yeah,
tools.
yeah. And what with the Trump trials going very, very badly for the prosecution, all of them, one of them is it's looking more and more like the judge is going to postpone it till after the election because the prosecution is completely unorganized. Um, in the case of Jack Smith, he's demanding a gag order that's blatantly unconstitutional. Um,
And whereas the judge wanted to go along with it, it's now it's been stayed by the appellate court, which is interesting because if they thought the appeal wouldn't prosper, they would not stay the order.
yeah, yeah.
That's no guarantee, but it shows that at least the appellate court is taking a second look. But the notion that a presidential candidate, or by the way, anybody on trial, uh, cannot speak freely is absurd. The
No,
notion that by Trump saying, I don't know, Jack Smith is an asshole, he's intimidating Jack Smith. I mean, come on, give me a break. What is this? Elementary school?
well, see, this goes back to that total irrationality, that Bill Maher irrationality, where he says that Trump is the greatest danger to democracy we've ever had because he won't leave he won't leave the White House when his term is up.
Actually, he did.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, Maher is claiming that he was the first person to point out that Trump wouldn't leave the White House if he lost the election, and he was right. It's like, oh, so Bill, are you saying Trump is still in the White House?
Right.
How did they get him out? Did they bomb him with the Air Force? Did they send in the Marines? What? He just walked out? He walked out on time. He didn't walk out even a second before it was.
And Hilarita calling herself the Generalissimo of the Resistance because we have to resist Trump's presidency after Trump won. And Loretta Lynn, if Trump wins, there will be blood on the streets. I mean, come on. Where was this asshole when these things were going on?
Well, it's easy. He just denies that it's all real. And, for some reason, conservatives are just in love with Bill Maher as they are with Vladimir Putin. And it's like, okay, you and I have different meanings of the word conservative in mind if you're in love with Putin and Bill Maher, but whatever.
No, listen, those people that you and I have been pointing at relentlessly for the past 4 years, who now happen to love Bill Maher, happen to love Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, come on, really? What kind of brain trauma do you have to have? They are essentially in favor of Russia and spread Russian propaganda with abandon and seem not to understand the concept of not letting Russia get away with occupied neighboring countries because, hey, the road to Lisbon is actually quite short. But no, they like Putin, they like RFK Jr., they hate Israel.
Yep.
I mean, really? They're conservatives? In what alternate universe?
I'm just doing a little math here. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. See, okay, the big news about Ukraine is that their commander in chief wrote an essay for Forbes or something, and he laid out all the mistakes the Ukrainians had made, and this is being taken by Ukraine hating weirdos that the war is lost and now it's time. The Russians won, and it's like, well, tell that to the Russians. They're still losing their best equipment on a daily basis. They've had to take all their aircraft out of Crimea. The Russians installed a GPS jammer in Ukraine. The Ukrainians blew it up with a GPS guided bomb. Exactly.
I mean, come on, this is beginning to be a joke.
Yeah.
This is I put this in here because it is also Forbes. And by the way, here's the Russian video with that particular point. But this gives you an idea of how incredibly stupid some of these things are. And we are going to we're going to get into this in a second, but I wanted to show you a couple more because this is insane. Look at this. Military intelligence. By the way, I'm beginning to believe that military intelligence is a perfect example of an oxymoron.
Sure.
Russia fails nuclear ballistic missile tests. The brand new missiles that the Russians, the Yars, that the Russians first tested in 2019, it turns out they cannot shoot them. Can you imagine if the 3-year-old missile ain't going anywhere?
Well, it's like there's
what will happen with the 50-year-old ones?
Well, this is the thing. I mean, okay, the Ukrainians just blew up 3 S-400 anti-aircraft systems, which have all been moved to Belgorod in Russia, and the Ukrainians are blowing them up one by one. And the Russians have a very limited number of these. They just lost the most troops in a single battle so far in 2023. That's November 2nd. Today is the 4th. Yeah.
Yes. This is now. Of course, this is trying to take Avdiivka, and they launched 20 attacks. 20 attacks, all of them in single file, all of them the same shit, all of them getting their ass kicked out. And they lost 240 tanks and other vehicles, I mean, troop transports, 240, and close to 8,000 soldiers.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is the Russians. The Russians and some Ukrainian officers are still locked into the Soviet mindset. The Ukrainian 128th Brigade just suffered a catastrophic loss because the commander insisted on having all the officers and men gather in a single building for an award ceremony. The Russians hit it with a bomb. And,
this is a mistake of Russian proportions.
Exactly. You don't do that. You just don't do that. So what all these critics of Ukraine, okay, for one thing, they don't know, their little brains don't realize that the Ukrainians have stopped the Russians and pushed them back dramatically without an air force, okay, without even helicopter gunships.
They pushed them back without an air force. They beat their fleet without a navy.
Without a navy.
And they hold the ground without air superiority of any kind.
Yeah. And the notion that Russia will inevitably win is ridiculous. I know there are a lot of people saying that the Ukrainians should have been given this, that, or the other much earlier. But the problem is that, before you just start throwing things, I mean, the training on an F-16 takes an American like 9 months, and the Ukrainians are going to be doing it much faster.
3 months.
Yeah, and there is. I mean, this fear is receding on a daily basis, but there is a fear that you don't want to give somebody your best technology if it can fall into the hands of the Russians or whomever.
Yeah, I mean, it works both ways. The best of the Russians' technology has already fallen to the Ukrainians, and we have it. And I
Exactly.
can understand that, particularly at the beginning of the conflict, we don't want to send our top-notch, latest generation stuff, because all it takes is for them to lose one.
Right.
Now, the F-16 is not the front line of our Air Force.
No.
The Abrams that we're sending were decommissioned in the 90s.
Yeah.
This is historical artifacts almost.
Yeah.
The problem is that we're being stingy with other things. In
Yeah.
order not to provoke Russia, whatever the fuck that means, we have refused to send them any long range artillery or missiles. And the handful that we did was under promise that they wouldn't be used to attack targets in Russian territory.
Right.
As if the Russians didn't have fuel depots and ammo depots and weren't, gathering to go into Ukraine in Volgograd or so.
Well,
It's ridiculous.
Well, it's also the oldest trick in the world. I mean, the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese used it. They had all they had to do was go into Cambodia, and we couldn't touch them. Multiple terrorist groups have done that. Gone into Pakistan or whatever. So what all these countries need is a stern talking to, and we don't do that. Trump did it, but the Biden administration is very weak, and Biden, despite everything, does
incredibly stupid.
Well, stupid, and also Biden doesn't want responsibilities. He wants all the glory but no responsibilities, and he takes credit for everything, but he won't make hard decisions. And Obama came out and said, well, okay, that's actually Israel and Hamas. But every time every time these people make the right decisions, then they backtrack because they're terrified.
Themselves.
Yeah, well, they're terrified of the raging masses of left-wing maniacs, and it's just, when you're Barack Obama, you shouldn't give a shit about what anybody says anymore, because you've already served your 2 terms. You're making tons of money just by existing. Say what's really on your mind, but it's
then he'd be silent for the rest of his life.
Apparently, I don't know. It's just, the whole thing is. I mean, okay.
Somebody's saying on the chat how the stepdaughter of Kakala is raising funds for Hamas.
Yeah.
Guess what? Obama used to raise funds for the PLO.
Yeah.
So what's new?
Well, I mean, going along with that, okay, you see a lot of videos put out by young people talking about how horrible everything is. Well, I just want to remind everyone, I'm 61 years old. So I grew up during the Vietnam War. Vietnam is a tiny country. We lost 60,000 people over 10 years in that little country. Yeah. Let me just double check real quick. American deaths, Afghanistan. We're in Afghanistan for longer.
Combat related, no more than 2,500.
American deaths, Afghanistan. American deaths, Afghanistan. Yeah, 2,400. So
Yeah.
yeah, so
I,
60,000.
I always tell people the camel fuckers killed more Americans in 2 hours in New York than in 20 years in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So, and when I was growing up, we had the hippies, and um we had sandbags and machine gun positions in the White House, because I mean, we had cities burning like much worse than during the 2020
Yep.
BLM riots. Then in the 70s going on, most of the 70s, we had like Bill Ayers running around murdering people. We had bombings. In one day we had over 830 bombings in one day
There
in
were
the United States.
200 bombs in New York State in 76.
Yeah. So
200.
200.
And that weren't jihadists or anything. It was the same people who today are teaching our kids at the University of Chicago, at Columbia.
Yeah.
Those people, the guys who were throwing bombs in 76, are today the chairs of the sociology department.
Right.
The,
No, and we're reaping the oats of all of that. We're everything that's happening now is the result of all those mega violent psychos, you know, taking over basically, and having, positions of responsibility.
yes.
But the good news is that it's all failed, and Americans have a history of suddenly turning 180 degrees and going in the other direction. And we're going to do that in the 2024 election. And if we're smart, which is a big if, we'll give the right people the chance to like fix everything they can and make sure it can never get as horrible as it is. And as horrible as it is today, can't even compare. I mean, okay, my parents, I once had a conversation with my parents, and I was just asking them, okay, they were born, they grew up during the Great Depression. Then they lived through World War II. So what I experienced was nothing compared to what my parents experienced. What young people are experiencing today, saying it's the end of everything, it's nothing to what I experienced growing up.
No.
Americans always, the world always has a way of fixing things after making tons of mistakes. And in the case of Ukraine, the Ukrainians will prevail. The new Speaker of the House is already, working on getting 400 million in artillery and air defense systems. It'll pass.
Yes, as you say, Ukrainians will prevail.
Yeah,
This is how good the Russians are doing.
yeah. No, and okay, they have limited manpower, but they don't have limitless. They don't actually have limitless manpower anymore, but they have a lot more manpower than the Ukrainians.
Yes.
But I mean, they're using like 1930s trucks now to go into battle.
We discussed this. God, in February, it's going to be 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the things we discussed was, if the Russians do not manage to take Kyiv within 3 weeks, they're toast. They never will.
Yeah.
The other thing I said is that what I was fearful of was a protracted war, because the Russians, if they cannot get their toy, are going to try to punish Ukrainians by every means possible, which they have been doing. for as long as possible. Now, they didn't send 190,000 soldiers to the invasion because they wanted to be measured. They sent 190,000 because that's all they had that could be sent. People speak of 1.5 million, 2 million soldiers in Russia. That is bullshit. 90% of those are people very well trained in the use of typewriters in little towns in Siberia who contractually cannot be sent outside of that town. Soldiers under arms was far less than 300,000. Since this war began, the Russians had to do several drafts. 300,000 first, then 500,000, then 500,000 again. Where the fuck are they?
Pushing up daisies.
Bingo. Intelligence of various countries agree that the Russians had at least 100,000 dead.
It's got to be
the Ukrainians say at least 200,000 dead.
300,000. They just passed the 300,000 mark.
300,000 plus, easy. And I think it was way over 50,000 in Bakhmut alone. Well, now they're doing the same shit. They're losing 8,000 people a day. Well, the only thing the Ukrainians have to do is survive a la Washington. They don't have to win battles. They have to be there. Exactly. The Russians cannot replace the equipment they're losing. They're scrapping the bottom of the world's barrel for munitions from North fucking Korea, whatever the crap that is.
Yeah, I mean...
drones from Iran.
Okay.
I mean, really?
The Iranians aren't sending them any more munitions because they're worried they may need them themselves, you know? So the Russians, there was all this talk that they'd improve the Iranian drone and it was going to be blip, 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 blip. Where is it? It's just, I mean, the indestructible love of Russian savagery among some people is really mind-opening. I mean, okay, I know that a lot of people have had their eyes open to, you know, the hatred of Jews in the world. That's not a surprise to me. What is a surprise to me is the sheer lust and love and you know, desire to get into bed with Russians. I didn't see that coming. And it's likely because none of these people know what the hell they're talking about. They see Putin as a traditional family values anti-globalist, like them. And it's
Putin is a psychopathic dwarf, for crying out loud. But you're right. Some people see him as a values guy. What values? The guy is a murderer and a serial rapist.
Yeah.
How does that mesh with your conservative values, morons? But again, those are the same people who think that RFK Jr. is a conservative.
Yeah, or, you know, that an RFK Jr. and Trump ticket would be the you know, would defeat, you know, all comers. And it's like, no.
God, I mean, I'll move to the Arctic.
Well, also, I mean, there's no way that RFK Jr. would run with Trump, you know, because Trump would set certain conditions, and he'd say,
for enough money, that son of a bitch would run with anybody.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, he's nothing but a no-life grifter, and has been his entire life calling for attention.
Well, he's just not. He's not a serious guy, and you know. But see, neither are the people who are promoting him. If you actually had to debate them for more than 5 minutes, it would be a disaster. I mean, you know, their answer to like everything that the Russians are doing, oh, it's all lies, it's all propaganda. Well, what's your evidence that it's all lies and propaganda? You need to prove to me that these are lies and propaganda.
Yeah.
Uh,
But if it is published in Sputnik and Russia Today, I don't need any further proof.
yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I just these aren't people. I mean, the one thing that I find that I can't tolerate is irrationality, and the irrationality that we see on display everywhere, where you have people who are rabid haters of this and rabid haters of that, and they don't even know why. Um, the rabid hatred of Israel, and what's so funny is you have the rabid hatred of Ukraine that has it's not based in anything real from the right wing who are supporting Israel, and then the rabid hatred of Israel who from the left wing who are supporting Ukraine, and it's like, where are the
Go
people
figure.
where are the people who are supporting both Ukraine and Israel? They seem to be a minority. I'm one of them.
Yeah, there's two of them. It's 100% of this screen.
Yeah, and again,
Maybe that's why the donations are so low.
well,
We offend both sides. I don't care.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. It's and you can't explain to people. They won't hear you when you tell them, look, I'm not deeply in love with Ukrainians and I'm not deeply in love with Israelis. I support both countries, but that doesn't mean that I'm
I go a step further. I don't fucking like the Ukrainians. That's
sure.
not the point.
Yeah.
You and I have discussed how my grandmother, who was originally from Moldova, but she lived in a town that is about halfway between Chisinau and Kiev. And the Ukrainians used to go in and destroy everything. And I'm not talking about the Nazis, I'm talking about 1910, 1920. I'm talking about the Cossacks. I'm talking about the fucking Bolsheviks. And finally, she had to leave. And let me put it mildly, she didn't have good memories of Odessa and Kiev and Chisinau. And as a kid, I didn't hear but the stories of how thoroughly fucking nasty these people were. So I'm not saying Ukrainians are the same thing today.
No.
It's 3 generations removed. For all I know, they're wonderfully loving people who want to be Europeans. That said, I have no love for them.
Well, I mean, they're very different
But
from
that
us.
ain't the point.
They're very different. They're culturally, they're you know, um, I mean, a hell of a lot of Ukrainian refugees. I just saw this unbelievable video of a Ukrainian war refugee, a 29-year-old woman drop kicking her 3-year-old down the hallway and like punching him like a boxer. This was being filmed from the apartment security cam or the neighbors. Like they have ring cameras on apartment doors now, believe it or not. And these people called the police, and she's been arrested and the kid taken away. But it's the sort of abuse that you don't often see in the United States.
No. But these primitive brutes are not endowed with certain qualities of our civilization, to put it
Yeah,
mildly.
and,
Of course, it's the same thing with the Russians.
well, that's the thing. I don't know if you saw the pictures of Miss Donetsk. She's the beauty, the most beautiful woman in Donetsk. This woman has the mouth of a lamprey. I mean, she has like the most inflated lips I've ever seen. It looks like she has a prolapsed rectum up here in her mouth.
Oh boy.
And she's got like these gargantuan fake boobs and 5-inch nails. She's a monstrosity. And you just look at that and you just
look. Sounds like the gal at the DMB here.
Well, I mean, I don't know. This is all artificial. This is all done by Russian plastic surgeons, or you know, I don't know. I don't know where Donetsk people go to get their plastic surgery, but it's a nightmare. No, and you look at this and you just go, I mean, these are not. We're not all one world. We don't all want the same thing, and
no.
You know,
but as Joanne says in the chat, the point is to keep putting from gaining ground.
Exactly. And
see, you don't have to like the Ukrainians.
No.
You don't have to like the Israelis. They can be quite a bore indeed. And, notice I said Israelis and not Jews, because there are Israelis of every stripe.
Well, this whole
far more diverse country.
This whole disaster with Hamas was a result of the Israelis once again deluding themselves that the what I've read is that they had convinced themselves that Hamas had finally, because of the Abraham Accords, they'd finally realized the futility of their ways, and now they were going to turn to governance rather than terrorism.
Yes.
And as a result,
that worked, didn't it?
Well, you ended up with the largest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and you know, this time they learned, but look what it took, and okay, they're telling everyone to okay, I watch Israeli war news every day, and they're mopping the earth with Hamas.
Oh yes.
They're sending in. They knocked off 2 top secret Hamas headquarters, and they've captured maps that show, you know, tunnels and
that was the incursion. There was a little over a week ago. There were a couple of incursions of the IDF into Gaza, and they went in and then out.
Yeah,
and in that particular incursion, they knew exactly where they were going, and they blasted through Hamas headquarters, took all of the maps. And by the way, have you noticed how the bad guys are always bureaucratic little dipshits?
Yeah, I mean, how stupid are you to have that? See, Hamas, what people
it's like the Nazis, you know, they're the accountants of death.
Well, also, okay, Hamas is basically run by the Iranian mullahs, which is an utterly centralized government. And so Hamas is utterly centralized. And so the Israelis are knocking off all the commanders, and everybody else is left like chickens with their heads cut off. The reports I've seen is that their entire tunnels full of terrorists are surrendering now because they have no light, they have no air. And
by the way, they had no air. They found oxygen generators hidden with candy in trucks of humanitarian aid that were destined to improve the quality of life in the tunnels, which is one of the things why I'm opposed. Taxative opposition to any kind of humanitarian aid going into the field of battle, assholes.
Well, also, I mean, okay, the Western press says that they can't evacuate. Over 800,000 of Gaza City's 1.1 million have already left. And this is despite
even though Hamas was killing people for living.
Well, I mean, I just saw a video tonight of a man riding his bicycle through a field of dead women and children who'd all been killed by Hamas snipers.
Mhm.
And he was sobbing his head off, saying, how could Arabs do this to Arabs? And it's like, well, I guess your eyes have been open too. The only time I've ever seen Palestinians shed genuine tears, I saw an interview with a former Fatah terrorist, and he had no legs. And he said that in 2005, when Hamas took over Gaza, he was captured and they machine gunned his legs and left him to bleed out. And there was some kind of conflict with the Israelis, and an Israeli soldier ran at him and with a board, and he thought, oh, he's going to beat me to death. And what the Israeli did was he applied a what do you call it, a tourniquet to one leg, and he splinted the other leg and basically saved his life. And as this guy was talking, he started crying. He said, so a Jew saved my life, and my fellow Palestinians tried to murder me. And he said, I've never gotten over that. And it's like, well, your eyes are open now at the cost of your legs. But
one of the commanders who organized the massacre in October 7th was a son of a bitch who was treated for cancer at a hospital in Jerusalem.
Of course.
And they got him clean. And of course, they didn't charge a freaking dime. But this guy, whose life was saved by Israelis in an Israeli hospital at Israeli cost, turns around and does that.
Well, do you remember there was a female Palestinian burn victim who was saved and gotten skin grafts in Israel? And then she tried to go back to the same hospital with a suicide vest on to kill the same doctors. And she couldn't explain why.
No. But if you listen to these assholes on TV, let me show you this one first before we go too far from the subject. But there you are. Oxygen concentrators. That's the humanitarian aid.
Yeah.
Supplies so that Hamas can survive in the tunnels to fight another day. What kind of bullshit is this?
Who sent this shipment?
Well, it came in with the UN, of course. By the way, since the UN is an organization where a vast majority of its members have already been more than clear in their hatred for Israel, I wouldn't allow any UN organization to come into Gaza under any guise for any reason.
Well, this is what's going to happen after Hamas is thrown out of power and Gaza is occupied by whomever. There's basically the UN is going to be kept out. And, okay, if it's the Gulf Arabs who are occupying and rebuilding, then they're not going to need any more fucking aid. They're going to be making their own money. It's really funny, Tlaib, and what the hell's that idiot's name? The guy with the missing tooth, Cornel West. I'd always heard the name Cornel West as this brilliant intellectual college professor. And then, have you ever heard the guy speak?
The guy is a moron. He's worse than a fucking retarded homeless. And by the way, on that note, I have to leave YouTube.
Okay.
And for all of you in YouTube who have been writing messages in the chat, can't you read?
No, they can't.
The first message in the chat is, we do not monitor this crap, nor do we answer it. So keep talking to yourselves or come over here, do whatever you want.
Let him
We're out of YouTube.
No, I heard Cornell West on Sean Hannity